100 questions about a will challenge.
Pull this down a little bit.
Seeing as this situation is entirely fictional and you will not be telling the truth, do you affirm that you will give us entry to testimony today?
I will do my best.
It's all the truth.
Now, I must apologize to you, Ms. Callahan. I thought you spelled your last name Hogan, and I got it all wrong.
People often do.
Sorry.
Good morning, Ms. Callahan.
Good morning.
You're a lawyer with the firm Callahan Associates, LLP,
Yes, I am.
and you were called to the bar in 2010.
That's right.
What is your area of practice?
I'm a general practitioner, but I focus primarily on estate administration and the preparation of wills.
When did you first come to know Sophia Goldstein?
I met Sophia in or around 2004.
So then how long would you say you've known her?
Roughly 10 years.
Did you have occasion to prepare a will for Mrs. Goldstein?
Yes, I did.
And when was that?
August 26, 2014.
Now you have a brief in front of you. If you could kindly turn to tab 6 of that brief.
Yes,
There
I have.
is under tab 6, Your Honor, do you have that as well?
I have no idea what you're talking about. What are you referring to?
Tab 6 of the joint brief, Your Honor.
Okay, yes.
Ms. Callahan, is this the copy of the last will and testament of Mrs. Goldstein dated August 26, 2014?
Yes, it is.
Well,
And
that
is-
would not make my tab 6. Hang on.
We'll get that sorted out for Your
Okay,
Honor.
keep going. I'll follow along.
And for clarity then, Ms. Callahan, is this the will that you prepared for Mrs. Goldstein?
Yes, it is.
And if you turn to the last page of the document there, the will, is that Ms. Goldstein's signature on the bottom of the page?
Yes, it is.
And how do you know that it's her signature?
Because I was a witness.
And are there 2 witness signatures on that page then?
Yes, there are.
One being yours, as you just indicated, and whose is the other?
A neighbor from across the road. Across the road from Sophia.
Now, if you turn to page 3 of the will, paragraph 6,
Yes?
it's my understanding that this is the paragraph of the will that deals with bequests of Mrs. Goldstein. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what does this paragraph indicate?
Sophia wanted to leave the residue of her estate to Boris.
And would that be the entirety of her estate then? When you're referring to the word residue, what do you mean by the word residue?
The entirety of her estate.
When did you first meet with Mrs. Goldstein in respect of her August 26, 2014 will?
I met with her on August 12, 2014 for instructions.
And we'll get to that date in a minute. But before that meeting that you had with her on August the 12th, had you ever dealt with Ms. Goldstein's assets before the making of this will?
Yes, in June of 2014, I effected the transfer of her interest in her real property into the name of her son, Boris.
And how was that transfer done?
That was done by way of a power of attorney for property that Sophia had given to Boris.
What was the reason that the power of attorney was used?
It's my understanding it was done using a power of attorney for the sake of convenience.
How well had you known Mrs. Goldstein?
I knew her very well. I'd known her for 10 years, and we spoke often and visited often. She speaks Russian, as do I, and we always enjoyed any opportunity to speak to each other in Russian, and we enjoyed each other's company.
So other than having conversations with her, did you have occasion to socialize with her then?
Yes, I did. We would talk on the phone. Sometimes I would go over for lunch or tea with her, and I was sometimes there for dinners with Boris as well.
Could you give us an estimate as to how many times you might have been at the house to visit with Mrs. Goldstein? Are we talking about dozens of times over the course of 10 years?
At least.
What did you know about Ms. Goldstein's marital status?
I know that she was married for a long time to Boris's father, Igor, and that Igor died of heart failure in 2009.
And after that, the passing of her husband, were you aware of any other type of relationship that she had?
None that I know of.
Spousal in nature?
No spousal-like relationships that I know of.
And what did you know about Boris's siblings?
Boris had one sibling, a sister named Riva.
What was your understanding, based on your conversations with Mrs. Goldstein over the 10 years that you had socialized and met with her and had discussions with her regarding her relationship with her daughter, Riva?
It was my understanding that Sophia and Riva were not close.
What was your understanding of her relationship with her son, Boris?
Over the 10 years that I had known Sophia, she told me frequently and often how much she loved her son. And in particular, after Igor died, she frequently told me how grateful she was for Boris's assistance.
And what did you understand as to who was living with Mrs. Goldstein following her husband's passing?
Boris lived with her.
What did you understand about, and again, this is before June of 2014, what did you understand about Mrs. Goldstein's health?
Sophia told me that she had been in a car accident in March of 2014. She was not seriously injured, but she was seriously mortified by it. And I know, as with many older adults, that she was experiencing a bit of cognitive decline.
Did you have any cause to be concerned about her mental status or mental health prior to June of 2014, based on your conversations with her and the dozens
I
of
spoke
times?
with her after the accident, and we spoke about it. I had no concerns about her capacity.
Now, you mentioned that your first meeting with Ms. Goldstein with respect to the preparation of her August 26, 2014 will was on August 12th. Did I get that correct?
That's right.
How was that meeting arranged?
Boris called me and told me that Sophia wanted to meet with me because she wanted to make a will.
Did it seem odd to you that her son was calling you?
No, Sophia had told me that that Boris helps her book the appointments that she wants to make. It wasn't out of the ordinary for him to do that.
And fair to say you knew her well enough that you could just pick up the phone and call her in any event?
Yes.
Now, the meeting on August the 12th, where did that take place?
In Sophia's home.
Who was there?
I met with Sophia alone. Boris was in the house, but he wasn't in the room.
And what language did the meeting take place in?
Mostly Russian.
Now, forgive me, I may have forgotten. Could you help me again with your background on Russian?
I studied the Russian language in university. I read and write Russian. I wrote a 15-page academic paper while in university in Russian. I speak Russian.
Fair to say, then, you're absolutely fluent both in writing and speaking in Russian.
Yes, I am.
And obviously fluent in English as well.
Yes, I like to think so.
So fair to say that the meeting took place on August 12th in both Russian and perhaps a touch in English as necessary.
Mostly Russian, yeah.
What was discussed at the meeting on August 12th?
Sophia told me that she wanted to make a will that left her estate to her son Boris.
Now, before we go down that a little bit further, were you aware at the time of any prior wills of Mrs. Goldstein?
Yes, she had a copy of her previous will with her. I recall that it was a mirror will that she'd done while Igor was alive. I think it was 2005. And they left the estate to each other if they were survived by each other, and if not, to their children in equal shares.
And again, those wills were done before Mr. Goldstein passed away, correct?
That's right.
Now, you've mentioned that you took instructions from Mrs. Goldstein at the August 12th meeting. Could you just tell me in detail again what those instructions were?
She wanted to leave her estate to Boris.
And by that, did that mean the entirety of the estate?
That's right.
So in other words, that would be referring back to the will that you've previously been directed to, the August 26, 2014 will. That would be the residue of the estate.
Yes.
How long did the meeting last?
About 15 minutes.
And did it strike you as different or odd or consistent with your conversations with Mrs. Goldstein over the years with respect to her intention, with respect to this last will?
I didn't find...
How can that properly be a question? That is not a proper question. First of all, it's leading. Second of all, no one understands it.
Yeah, I thought it was in Yiddish.
If my friend is having a problem understanding the question, I'll rephrase the question.
And put it in English this time, Mr. Vander Zee, please.
Based on your numerous prior conversations with Mrs. Goldstein regarding her relationship with both her son and daughter, did it strike you as odd, the instructions that she was giving to you with respect to her last will?
No, it did not.
What views, if any, did you have about Mrs. Goldstein's capacity on August 12, 2014?
In my view, she was capable.
And what was that based on? Your view, what was your view based on?
I knew her well, I spoke to her. I spoke to her about about the will that she wanted me to draft for her.
Did you have any concerns of any kind with respect to whether Mrs. Goldstein was being influenced with respect to the instructions she was giving to you?
No, I had no concerns.
What did you do after the meeting?
I went back to my office and drafted a will based on her instructions, and then I called Sophia and made arrangements to return on August 26th, 2014 to have the will executed.
How was that next meeting arranged?
I called her.
And what was the date exactly that it took place on?
August 26, 2014.
Where did it take place?
Sophia's home.
Who was present?
Sophia and I met alone to review the will together, and then a witness came into the room to witness the will with me.
What did you have with you when you came to the meeting with Mrs. Goldstein?
The will.
Okay, so you had a copy of the will. And
I was wondering where that was going.
And
a gun.
What was discussed at the meeting?
Now we're talking. He had a gun. Now I understand. I'm a criminal guy.
We talked about the will.
And specifically, did you take her through each and every provision of the will?
Yes, I read the will to her first in English and then translated it into Russian.
Did she have any questions regarding the will or its contents?
No, she didn't.
Did you have any concerns whatsoever as to her level of understanding of the contents of the will?
I read it to her in English and in Russian, and in my view, she understood its contents.
Are we almost wrapped
we
up,
are,
Mr. Vander Zee?
We are, Your Honor.
Thank you.
What views, if any, did you have regarding her capacity on August 26, 2014 to execute the will?
In my opinion, she was capable of executing the will.
Did you have any concerns of any kind whatsoever that she was being influenced with respect to the will?
There was nothing about her demeanor or her conversation flow or her behavior that made me think that there was any reason to be concerned about influence.
How long did that meeting last?
Roughly 15 minutes.
After the meeting, what did you do?
I went back to my office with the original will. I mailed her a copy of the executed will and a statement of my account.
And did she pay your account?
Yes, she did.
Your Honor, those are my questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Callahan, do you need a drink? I think you might need some water. You look a little thirsty. Shameless self-promotion.
Oh, a Hull and Hull flask. Thank you.
You know, you don't get where you are in your career without a little shameless self-promotion.
Can I get one of those?
So, Ms. Callahan, I understand that you've been practicing law since 2010, 4 short years.
Or long.
Well, it depends on what firm you're at, I guess. You've been provided a copy of the will, which I understand was 18 pages long. Is that correct?
Is that right?
Yes, and that was the will that Mr. Vander Zee took you through?
18 pages?
Sorry, it's 17 or 18? I couldn't see the last page.
I believe it was 3.
It It was a 3?
Yes.
I don't see that in my
I'm
book.
not sure if we have the same copy.
All right, well, that's good. We're making up the facts. We may as well continue to make them up. Let's just talk a little bit about your background again. As I heard, you went to university with Boris.
Yes, I did.
Right. And you were in the same study group, and you were good friends.
Yes, we were.
And you maintained your good friendship to this day.
Yes.
And you knew Sophia, and you'd met Sophia at the time that you met Boris over 10 years ago.
That's right.
All right. And again, you maintained some contact that you described to me today, to Mr. Vander Zee today, with both Boris but more importantly, some contact with Sophia.
Yes.
All right. And your retainer with respect to Sophia represented 2 transactions. One was a property transfer regarding 60 Northmark Drive in a part of Canada I'm not familiar with, Thornhill.
Yes.
And that was done on June 5th, 2014.
That's right.
All right. And the second retainer was preparing the will, which was done, and you've gone through that evidence in regard to the meeting and the preparation of that will, correct?
Yes.
All right. There was no retainer agreement ever signed between yourself and Sophia?
No, there was not.
All right. All right. And let's just go through what we know. Mr. Vander Zee has described it for us through your evidence. We know that Boris contacted you in respect of both the transfer of the property, the family home, and contacted you with respect to the preparation of the will, correct?
Correct.
All right. We also know that you have no notes of any of the contact with Boris, Sophia, in respect of the 3 times that you met for legal purposes, i.e. the transfer of the home and the 2 meetings of the will.
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
You have no notes of any of your meetings.
Right.
All right. So when you gave us your description of the events that transpired, that was entirely as a consequence of your complete and utter perfect memory of the events.
Correct.
I see. All
That's
right.
cool.
Yeah.
She's got a perfect memory. She doesn't need notes.
Handy.
Absolutely. Now, Boris was present, though, at the 2 meetings with Sophia. In fact, he was in the adjacent room, wasn't he?
I don't know what room he was in.
Well,
he was in the house.
You remember that counsel, after a tremendous amount of argument and thousands of emails, came up with an agreed statement of facts.
Right.
And in that agreed statement of facts, one of the agreed statement of facts was that Boris was in the adjacent room for both of the meetings in respect to the will.
Okay.
All right, good. I just wanted to make sure you understood what we've done on the agreed statement of fact basis. So that's understood. Then we know that your meeting with Sophia with respect to the will on August 12th, 2014 lasted 15 minutes. We also know that Boris, as I say, was present in the room adjoined. We also know as Dr. Schulman, am I correct, that he was present in the adjacent room for the...
Dr. Schulman?
No, that Boris was present in the room adjacent on the August 12th meeting.
That is what it says in the agreed statement of facts, yes.
And we also know, as it says in the agreed statement of facts, as Dr. Schulman described it, you had some superficial banter with Sophia at the meeting on August 12, 2014.
That is what it says in the agreed statement of facts.
And,
yes.
well, and that you took instructions as a consequence of that superficial banter.
I took instructions from Sophia.
All right. And that at the time, on August 12, 2014, as a consequence of your instructions that you took from Sophia, as Dr. Schulman described, there was a dramatic change in her will. And that was that she eliminated not just Riva, but her grandchildren from her estate. Correct?
Were her grandchildren in her previous will? I don't recall that.
She eliminated Riva.
Yes.
Correct?
That's
and Riva
right.
has 2 children.
That's right.
All right. And that again, you were no notes of this meeting whatsoever.
Right.
All right. And there is no documentation, as Dr. Schulman described, as to the rationale for the gifting of the will in 2014, correct?
No documentation.
All right. And then on your meeting on August 26, 2014, when you met with Sophia again 15 minutes?
Yes.
All right. And that superficial banter occurred again?
I
To the
met
extent
with
of
her
your
and discussed the
discussions?
will.
Sorry?
I met with Sophia and
And
reviewed the will with her.
And that I understand that social discussions only
Yes.
occurred.
Social
All right.
discussions, yes.
All right. And that Boris was again present in the adjacent room.
That's what it says in the agreed statement of
All right.
facts.
Well, you don't recall that, I guess.
I don't know where he was. I couldn't see him.
I see. So that agreed statement of fact isn't something that you stand behind. It is just something that you're accepting for the purpose
I
of this.
have no reason to dispute where he was in the house.
All right. And that in the agreed statement of facts, our lengthy will, whether it's 17 or 18 pages long,
Or three.
was translated in Russian. Was translated in Russian exclusively by you.
Yes.
All right. Not in English and Russian. It was translated in Russian.
Right.
All right. So that was just a mistake when you gave that evidence to Mr. Vander Zee.
But it wasn't English. How can it be translated from English to English? Of course it was
No, but it
translated
wasn't read
into
in
Russian.
English, and it was translated.
Yeah, it made no sense. Sorry. Sorry.
The will in English was translated by you in Russian.
Yes.
All right. That's what we know. Now, let's talk about what you didn't do. We've already identified that you didn't take notes. We are also at the meetings, both meetings in respect to taking instructions of the will, you didn't ask Sophia about her health, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't ask her about the size of her estate.
Correct.
And you didn't ask her about her assets.
That's right.
And you didn't ask her for her reasoning for disinheriting Riva.
That's right.
All right. What else you didn't ask or chose to ignore or chose to avoid in the discussions was, at those two meetings, was the car accident she had in March 12, 2014. Correct?
I believe my evidence was that I had talked about all of this with her at some time, but you're right, not during my superficial banter on August 12 or August 26.
When you were taking instructions to do her will to disinherit her daughter, right?
To give her estate to her son, her
And
loving
disinherit
son.
and disinherit her daughter.
To give the estate to her son.
All right. After that, you also didn't, as Dr. Shulman described, you didn't talk about the effect of what might be a right subdural hematoma that occurred in May of 2014 with Sophia at the meeting.
That's right.
All right. And at the meeting, you didn't talk about the fact that on May 11th, 2014, Sophia was diagnosed at Sunnybrook with early stage Alzheimer's disease.
Early on stage or early stage?
Early stage Alzheimer's disease is the
That's
agreed
right.
statement of fact. All right. Not discussed. And then you also didn't discuss at the meetings when you took instructions for the wills to disinherit Riva, you didn't discuss that Boris had used his power of attorney over Sophia to transfer her home into his name alone.
That's right.
All right. And you didn't discuss that the documents evidencing the transfer were on a postcard written in Russian dated 2014 saying, I give you my house as place for live. You didn't discuss that.
Yep.
Sorry, what language is that?
Well, it's Russian.
Ah, okay.
So I suggest to you, Ms. Callahan, that in fact no meaningful testing of testamentary capacity has ever occurred in respect of Sophia's instructions that were taken by you in August of 2014.
I understand that's your suggestion.
Do you agree or disagree with that suggestion?
I disagree.
All right. And do you disagree? I suggest to you that you had become blinded by your long-standing relationship with Boris to take any meaningful instructions that would ever derogate from the possibility that Boris would get the whole estate.
I understand that's your client's position. That is not my evidence.
And so my suggestion's incorrect.
That's right.
I see. And I suggest to you that you did a cursory, sloppy, and uninformed effort to test testamentary capacity to determine whether or not Boris was indeed to be the sole heir to the exclusion of Riva in August of 2014.
That is what you are trying to convince the judge of. That is not what happened.
So you disagree with my suggestion?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Well, I hope you have a long drink, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, I will. Thank you very kindly.
Mr. Hall, one question. You keep going on about these notes. I mean, it only happened last year. What does it matter, Ms. Callahan? If you have notes, you have a perfect memory.
It's all up here.
I don't get it.
I'm going to let my counsel who are doing closing submissions address that
All right,
ridiculous question.
They better. Thank you, Ms. Callahan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.